How you guys doing? This is Steve Floyd with the state. We are covering the state of affairs in the ecosystem, the state of everyone's mind, and the big cluster fail that went on this week of June 20th, 2018. The insanity of the last week since the chain has gone live, and I'm speaking of EOS, the EOS blockchain. My name is Steve Floyd. I'm a block producer candidate for EOS Tribe, and I have a few people on from the community and another block producer by the name of Rob Consdorf, aka Rodrigo, and Katie Roman, who is basically going to kind of kick this off and talk about really what happened this last week and just kind of where their heads at and what they're up to. Another reason that I always wanted to do this feed was, as block producers, we want to talk to each other and have an open dialogue, but there's a lot of suspicion of block producers having too close to relationships or too many conversations behind the scenes. So this show is just me also trying to kind of add a community layer to this. So all the open discussions that we have about things, everybody can always go back historically and see what we talked about. So with that said, everybody go ahead and introduce themselves. Did you want to start, Rob? Or
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Consdorf, aka Rodrigo. Founded EOS Detroit, a blog producer. So yeah, we're out here. I've been really busy. I'm sorry. It's been a really long day. In fact, I spoke on two separate events today already. And yeah, so I didn't realize that this was going to be a recorded speaking session. That's how
it's all good.
My head's in the sand. So anyways.
You should have seen Kevin when he came on. It was so funny. His hair was like the last show. His hair was, I don't know if any of you guys saw that, but it was really funny. He thought he was just joining a meeting. He was just like, oh, wait, something happened. I need to jump on a call. And he didn't know what it was. And he jumps on and he's like in his robe and his hair's all froed out. And it was like, this is what happens when you partake in too much EOS.
Yeah, it's candid, but that's okay. We can roll with it.
Right.
Yeah. And so this week, EOS Detroit, we've been sponsoring an event at Detroit Startup Week. We've been engaging the community, giving out educational materials related to EOS. So we've been really focused on kind of teaching people locally, getting people's interest peaked. Maybe they'll join our community, maybe not, but we're trying to put out opportunities out there for people. And there's been a lot going on in the EOS sphere too. I mean, the EOS 911 debacle, where it seems that the process was stepped outside of. That is a very interesting thing. It gives great fodder for would-be detractors of EOS when we don't use the process that we're trying to hold ourselves to. On the other hand, sometimes you got to break the law to do what's right. So it's hard to say. It's a very gray area, I think.
Well, I mean, there's another layer to it that, I personally thought the middle would have been, provide the actual tokens, the 1,300 tokens for the wallets that were affected out of the inflation for the block producers, and then just, go through arbitration to recover that. And if that was not possible, you would have avoided like, what is that, 10 grand or something? You would have avoided like at least $100,000 worth of PR.
Yeah.
But some of us who drive strategy, in the ecosystem, were kind of put secondary to the engineers. And it's unfortunate because we don't think like they do and vice versa. And, we all have our strengths, but, maybe like strategy or people in comms aren't really, they're just not focused on that. You know what I mean? That firsthand, being technical yourself. It's not that you can't do that stuff, but you have to be focused. You have to surely be focused on an outcome and like really think about it and to continually think about that. And when that's all you think about, you're probably going to be a little bit better than maybe a guy who's coding all day or that's dealing with network problems.
Yeah, definitely. And weighing the pros and cons. Like I didn't even know what the magnitude of the funds were.
A lot of people didn't. Yeah.
So I was assuming we were talking about millions.
I was too. That's what the
And when
problem.
when I hear that it's that much, it's like, yeah, what I would have helped. I would have pitched in to avoid the
Me too. Like me too. A lot of us. That was there's internal discussions just among the chats that everybody can see publicly, and then there's now finally a framework for people to actually, to have transparent. All the meetings, all the BP meetings are all going to be streamed now, which I think was needed a long time ago, and that way some of this lack of decision making and leadership that has gone on can get called out, and it's not just like some other BP saying it. It's not just some other internal person go, I don't like him, we don't need him on the call, which
Mhm.
happened to me a lot, because I'm outspoken. I'll say what it is, and I do have some good ideas, sometimes, maybe not all the time, but in this particular situation, I think my original idea would have fared better than the outcome. But that's because of that, they are being more inclusive. So I think ultimately it was just a growing pain that we've all got to deal with. So good and bad
Hey,
thing. What did you
this-
think about it, Katie?
You know, I'm just a token holder at this point, right? Like
You're
I don't
so
know.
much more than than a token holder.
I'm self-assigned, and I apologize in advance to everyone. I have my 20-month-old here. I wasn't expecting him to be awake.
Totally okay.
So
Yeah,
when I
totally.
talk, you might hear him in the background. But for me, at first I was just because I'm not, this is my first real foray deep into blockchain. I mean, I spent time on Steemit, but like barely. And I was like, oh, this is so great. They're doing the right thing and they're going to give these people their funds back. And I was just like, I'm so proud of them. They did the right thing. This is what governance is all about, that people can step in where code's not enough. And then all the FUD flew. And at first I was really pissed because I was like, talk about overthinking the right thing, right? Like they're not going to hurt anyone. But as I researched and learned more and read more and, Fuzzy educated me more on it, I was like, okay, these people are just afraid because they've seen this shit happen before. Like
Yep.
it might be well meaning at first, but the next time they freeze someone's account, it's because of something that's not as or important or noble or clear cut. And then all of a sudden they're freezing accounts left and right. So I get what the fear is now. But I really think that it kind of blew up more than it had to. I mean, and what was weird to me, stop it, little guy, is that my understanding, and this isn't what has been made super clear to me, this is just what I gathered from New York's post on it, is that ECAF, they wanted ECAF to like step in and take a role, but they were like, we don't have jurisdiction yet because the Constitution perhaps isn't valid because it's not in every hash. And then that just adds a whole nother layer of what the hell's going on here? Like, I thought we had a constitution. You're telling me it's not. So I think it was just growing pains and confusion all around. I mean, it was crazy.
So there's Roman. We got Roman and Raleigh just popped in too. This is awesome. How are you doing, Roman?
Hello, Steve. Thanks for having me. Hello, Rob in Detroit. I'm a big fan.
Hey, Roman. Nice to meet you.
The first best comprehensive EOS presentation I gave was from a Detroit meetup. The first one I listened to was by
Same
you.
Here. Same here.
Well, thanks, guys.
So just to get you up to speed, Roman, this feed it's called The State, and basically just like the name would connotate, the state of people's mind in the space, state in terms of computer science, and really just like how we're viewed as BPs in the BP community. We're viewed as the state. So I wanted to create a channel where a lot of people could congregate over an hour or two feed and just come in and chime in and have a human layer, but also have full disclosure and transparency for the community. And it kind of functioned like a little radio show where people can come in every few weeks and just say what's going on and what they really think, and a little more laid back than like the more mainstream outlets. So that's kind of the gist to get you up to speed. I just wanted to kind of get your take specifically on, what you thought about the last week of events. We had like three things converge in the community. We had, obviously the ECAF wasn't actually active yet. So the block producers, technically, if they had not taken action on the tokens, they would have been liable. And if they didn't if they did freeze them, they would be arbitrating against themselves. So I think that Kevin and team led the best that they could do. I think, some of us who are, strategy guys could have been on that call. We probably would have said, well, hey, why don't you just take some of your inflation? It's not that many tokens. I thought it was millions too. Me and Rob both thought it was a lot of money. And then we found out it was like 1,300 tokens or something. We're like, just get 5 guys to throw like half a day's inflation at it and save ourselves $100,000 worth of, PR. You know what I mean? Like, but you have these really hardcore engineers making these decisions, and they won't let, they think that the other more mouthpiece, the more, vocal people in their operations would be disruptive. And sometimes that's true, but I'd say most of the time it's a good thing. You know what I mean? Because those people are going to say, no, guys, like, no, we need to do it like this, and I think that's what Dan kind of hinted at a lot about. We got to be Braveheart, sometimes, and just push stuff through and not care what people think, because that leadership is actually what drives the final decision. You know what I mean? And some people just don't, you've seen a lot of the guys over in Asia, they don't want to be rude. They're just being nice. It's a cultural thing. They're not trying to be rude or anything, but they just want to wait for a consensus, and everyone, it's part of their culture. So in the West, we're like, wait, what do we do? And it's like a Canadian standoff.
Well, Denny from Who Boy certainly contradicted that stereotype. He had a lot to say about whether ECAP is legitimate yet. I think what you pointed out was the strongest argument I heard against freezing the accounts, that was creating a victims fund. Right. That conversation lasted over an hour. Like, it was, and on the whole, I was very impressed. I thought people were making very principled arguments, entirely focused not on the PR, but what's the right thing to do. So on the whole, I think it was great, and I think Kevin from New York was a class act. First, they freeze the accounts, and then they open up an arbitration case against themselves for doing so. Great.
I mean, that's that in this situation, because there's another side to that argument that if we had done that, people said, well, then we're setting the precedence that VPs are going to compensate token holders every time there's a theft. And I'm like, no, because then ECAF would be in place. The only situation, this is literally the only situation where we would have to do this. And then when ECAF's in place, they can go through the arbitration forum and deal with it. But then there's also the argument that we may not have got the tokens back. But I just don't think that it was worth enough to cause all that. So that's, if anybody else wants to chime in on that. Adam, did you notice any of that stuff? Or?
Yeah, so I think that with what happened, I'm surprised that it was only like 7 accounts. Like the 9/11 channel had like over 1,000 people. I'm surprised it really only was 7 accounts, and like aside from the numbers that, and then I think the way they handled it. It could have gone better, but it was honestly, and I still think this is going to happen with other things. What Block One did was create the software, but now we're running into all the problems of actually using this. Like, we didn't have, like, this constitution should have been done before mainnet was up. We should have had all this ECAF set up before, and even now, like, we're like the worker proposal system. There was so much time to figure that out. That stuff can be hashed out like prior. Everyone was just so eager to get it out that we didn't make sure like all the ducks were in a row before just sending it out.
Well, they changed. That's another point to all this, Adam, is, and I want to hear how Rob and Roman feel about this, but they actually, like, at the last minute, like 3 weeks before the mainnet launch, changed the number of supporting nodes. And that's put the network at a disadvantage. I've been talking to a lot of guys who are like, basically they're closing their doors in the next few weeks. And these are bright guys from like the gaming industry. I mean, senior guys from networking that are a really, really good asset to the network. And to see those people leave, I mean, that's a disservice to everything that had built up the last 6 months. So let's
name the change so people know what it is. It used to be that the top 121 get paid. Mm-hmm. And now everybody who earns more than 100 EOS tokens a day gets paid. And that turns out that there's only the top 21 plus, I think, 30 or 40 standbys getting paid. Is that right?
Up to like 54 right now or something like that.
Yep.
And then
it's not ideal. I mean, now it's 49, I believe. And it just kind of, I know from what we've been paid in the low 40s, we've been pushed out a few times and crawled our way back up. And it was basically, we were from 100 to 200 token range in flux, depending on if you're 49 up to like 30. And, you know, most of the lion's share obviously is the top 21, particularly the top 5 are getting high 800 to 1,000 tokens a day. You can go see those wallets. So it's interesting, you know, that was done at the last minute. And I'm just wondering, like, what was the reason? Because I never got a specific reason of why they did that.
I think to shed a little light on maybe why, not saying that one is better than the other. Certainly if we had the old system, our block producer would be earning some revenue, which would help me sleep at night. But it's okay. I think the idea here was there was a long tail of funds. So slot 121 is making less than slot 100, and slot 70 is making more than slot 100. And so the idea being, eventually the pay gets so low that it really doesn't even make a dent in your operations. Like maybe one slot number 121 was only earning like 1 EOS per day. So at that pay rate, that standby still can't operate a fully fledged block producer infrastructure, you know, theoretically, without having some other revenue stream. So by having the minimum threshold of 100 EOS, which equates to 0.49% of the vote, I think, or higher, you're basically assured that everyone getting paid is, you know, earning enough to keep the lights on, or more than enough. But the problem here, I think, is there's a couple problems. You know, voter apathy is a well-known issue. I think this really comes down to a voter education thing, where, you know, the voters should understand that it's their duty to hire more standbys, but that's a huge coordination problem. And, you know, a few people with huge stakes can really throw things off too. And yeah, so it turns out, you know, and UIs don't help either, like voting UIs that show the top 10 or top 15 or top 20 first. Right. Because an apathetic voter is just going to go click, 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 click. Okay, I voted. Bye.
So and whoever the top people are, yeah.
That's why we see
voter bias. Yeah, it's a real thing. So shuffling these tools, like, I think that's kind of the next phase, is us as a community standing up for what best practice is for a voting portal, badges, you know, showing all the different, you know, compliance stuff with block producers, their BP JSON file, their announcement, their you know, their ownership disclosure, and all of those components need to be badges. So when you're voting, one, it's shuffled. Every single voter portal is expected by standard of the community, or they're not going to get the you know, the endorsement unless they have a certain standard of best practices. And that's what should come through this voting proxy initiative. This, you know, we talked about it today. We shouldn't say proxy because it's kind of sterile, but use delegate because it's a little more warm. You know, delegate for the people, rather than proxy for the people that we were going for. And I think that initiative should drive exactly that home, you know what I mean, to everybody, and say, hey guys, like, if you're doing a voter portal, it's pre-selecting, and then in doing that, and by following standards, you get more rewards. But the reality is just what you said, there's no benefit in doing that. It's just like the problems with Steam It and bid shares. People game it because there's no economic benefit in doing things the right way. So if you provide all this work and all this, you know, community initiative to try to make it more fair, in the end, voters are just going to vote for the shuffled people, and it's just going to be a smaller percentage. So I think voter education is like probably the most important thing that we can do as a community right now.
Yeah, and that's the thing we can do now. And just looking quickly, you know, at the vote distribution, it did seem like after Dan's statements about the importance of standbys, and I saw that EOS Tribe did a good job of getting that message out a little bit on Twitter.
Right.
It did seem like the votes redistributed a little bit. So, you know, that the voter education is something that we can do now. The other tool, of course, is to have a referendum that changes the requirements. That'll take a little bit more time. but just judging broadly from the conversations happening in Telegram, it does seem like that has support too. So hopefully this is a problem of today, and 1 year from now, we will forget that it ever happened.
I mean, I think it's a lot easier than, let me first introduce Travis from Everpedia. Travis, you're on mute right now. Can you hear us?
Oh, hey guys.
Nice.
Nice to see you again, Travis.
Hello.
Hi.
How's it going, man? Grinding?
Yeah.
I don't know how it goes.
Trying to stay out of the politics, I guess, of the mainnet. Kadar on our team is handling the Liberty block producer. I've been mainly just doing a bunch of coding. So.
And you do a great job.
Thanks.
So what is, just introduce yourself real quick for the audience. This is streamed live. We do this, like I said, you probably missed that part. So any interactions that we have is in the BP community, we kind of have like a show where we can be a little more frank and laid back and have a little more time to explain what we're thinking, but also so the token holders can see everything we talked about. We weren't doing this in a private meeting or anything. So anyways.
So actually, so my name is Travis Moore. I'm the CTO of Everpedia. Right now, we're actually in the Caymans getting ready for our airdrop, which should be happening sometime next week. So we're very excited. We actually have an MVP of our DApp. We're using Scatter. It's been working on our local Node.io, so we're going to have to move it over to the mainnet soon. But I've just been working on that for now. I actually just put it up on our VM a couple of days ago, so I'm getting excited.
Nice. Yeah, so it's about to go live. Everpedia is now moving from a testnet environment to the mainnet environment.
Yes, we actually posted our smart contract code on GitHub, and it's available for anyone to see. We still have to do a security audit on it, obviously. But yeah, we should have the main website up pretty soon. I mean, we have the existing website, but both of them are going to be existing in parallel for a little bit until we move everything over. The centralized one and the blockchain one.
So I've also got Raleigh Felton here from the tribe. He's a old vet from the agency world, advertising, user experience design, UI, branding, kind of old school guy like me. Joined the tribe a while back, and I was just going to give you a chance to introduce yourself to everybody. Raleigh.
Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm like Steve said, I'm Raleigh Felton, and I do product design, but also know branding, advertising, design in general. And I've just really kind of committed myself to being a part of the EOS ecosystem and trying to figure out how to make it simple and make it intuitive and bring the masses in based off of good design. I mean, I'm still very new at all this, and me trying to learn some of this stuff, there's so many questions I have. And so it's going to be my personal goal to actually really bring this home so that I can show my mom and be like, it's this easy.
That's kind of why we clicked up, is because out of a lot of the design and stuff that BPs were doing, I'm not saying I'm the greatest, but my stuff was probably standing out more than most during that time period. And he kind of saw what we were about in our whole steez, and just kind of clicked up. And we both have this mission of trying to drive larger adoption and remove friction from the space any way that we can. And we're certainly not the only people doing that, but we just both kind of want to contribute to that mission. And, when people look at EOS Tribe a year from now, to be like, I really dig the stuff coming out of their camp. You know what I mean? More than just infographics, like the dApps that we do, because, that facilitates deal flow. I was saying that in the Happy interview that, we don't understand that, when we pump out shit coins that have no utility, it messes up the space and investor confidence, and when we are really thorough and we take our time with really solid ideas, that it attracts the guys who are legitimate to want to work with us. And that's just been kind of our personal mission. And that's also why we really dug the Everpedia guys. That's why I've reached out to you guys a few times, and Rob, is we all have a very similar view of that. I think that's cool. The people that you see in the space are a lot smarter about that than you normally see, you know, in EOS in general. I'm not taking anything away from the other cryptocurrencies or the other projects or the other protocols, but good Lord, I mean, these are sharp people that have finally come out and go, oh, cool, finally a system that scales, you know, finally a system that has the usability to actually start building stuff on it. So it's, you know, that's to my point earlier, that we can't let, you know, these really solid people in the top 100 fade away. You know, it would be a shame to, you know, to lose some of that talent. So
I think our votes are in the remaining 75%.
But, you know, as a token holder, what scares me is, you know, when I was learning about this, is that because a lot of these people that are just outside of like 30 below not getting paid, let's say, you know, a lot of these people are independent. A lot of these people, you know, self-funded, self-started. They don't have necessarily that VC backing to kind of keep them going for the next, you know, 3 months, 6 months, however long it's going to take for more voter turnout to happen, for more people to feel confident that these wallets aren't phishing scams, right? And they're going to be gone. And sorry, not sorry, but I know for a fact that 2 or 3 of the top 21 BPs at different points just recently, you know, weren't creating blocks, don't have redundancy, didn't even know how to set up a node. You know what I mean? Like that's just real facts. And I'm not a BP candidate, so I can say it. But come on now.
You need to say that more, because that's kind of the problem. If we cleaned up these like 15 people that are basically stealing inflation from the network, I'm not naming anybody, but we know, you know, the 12, 15 range, we're unsure of what that number is, but somewhere in there. And then at the same time, we highlighted the people who had contributed so much, and kind of the best of the best list, the compliant list. We could clean this up. But I still think we need to expand to at least the original 121 supporting nodes, you know.
What's the 121? They changed that though to try to starve out potential squatter BPs, right?
I don't even agree with that. Like, I just don't agree with that, because that could have been cleaned up through arbitration and the processes we're going through right now.
But I think that's why they did it. And so I'm saying, I think that their reasoning for scaling back on the 121 was so weak anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't understand. I don't understand that.
We could do, this has been talked about a few times over the past few days, some kind of test for standbys to show that their nodes are alive and awake, some sort of emulating what an active node would be doing, but randomly tapping all this, you know, all the backups. That would give us hard data about which standbys are actually set up fully ready to go, and which ones are just sort of, you know, sitting around trying to milk it, I guess. And I'm not sure technically how to accomplish that, but
I mean,
all the signs I see like point to the situation getting better. Like, the media is still getting their bearing. So the stuff that Katie says, like, the media is just learning how to talk about that and how to measure that, and new tools are coming online. And it's not just the tech, it's disclosures. You know, almost nobody did disclosures. That pressure is just starting now, and it's starting both on the media side and in the arbitration side, ownership disclosures. So I think there's still going to be a lot of hiccups, and it's gonna converge. It's never going to be perfect, but I think the forces are emerging that will make things start converging towards getting better teams and better BPs the stuff they deserve.
And do you agree that some of these unnamed, we will leave nameless, are going to disclose? Do you believe a certain group of BPs that many view to be the problem, or part of this suspect group that people are pulling out the pitchforks for, that there's any teeth to that? Do you think that they're going to actually give full disclosure, knowing the nature of some of their history?
I'm not privy to that history. You know, I've certainly got my eye on a few that look strange to me, but I don't know any specific history. But I think we're going to see everything.
I mean, just some of these groups, some of these conglomerates historically not being, you know, very transparent, being very opaque organizations. Do you think that that's actually going to happen? Like, if the whole network and all the good guys do you think that they're going to step forward and give their full ownership, disclosure, and everything?
I do. I think the arbitration is as big as the tech in EOS. It's as big and revolutionary as the tech side of it. And yeah, I think it'll happen. It'll happen slower than a lot of us would like it to happen, but I think it'll come.
Do you guys think that verifying these ownership disclosures would do you think that is it going to involve going into thorough detail to verify that these ownership disclosures are really true? Because these big conglomerates, they certainly have ways of hiding the truth, really, especially when they have so much to lose.
They have trusts. They have trusts in the Cayman and similar to EOS New York and Cook Islands, and you'll never know what they own. Legally, you can't. It's like
we're going to see worker proposals for auditors, so we won't know for sure, but we'll be able to apply the same scrutiny that you get applied in the financial world, which is also flawed, but it's not ineffective. There's a reason companies go on high alert when the auditors walk in the door. So there's no reason why we won't be able to have a team of auditors or multiple overlapping teams. Unfortunately, the worker proposal might not come online until the end of the year. So that's a long time to wait for the guys barely hanging in there. But I think it'll happen.
So there's other avenues, even the guys that may drop off, there are also other opportunities through the worker proposal system to do work on the network. It's just a matter of waiting that long to try to get some of the system in place. What do you think that's going to look like? Many have referenced the dashboard. What do you think how do you see that working?
It's really early. Only today was the announcement of what they call the project charter for the worker proposal system. So it's like a few-page mission statement of what we're going to do. And there's sort of been a standard that we're not making proposals yet. We're just asking questions and collecting questions, which is painfully slow, for all the people that want things to start happening. I know the big ideas out there. Dash is a huge idea that's out there. My idea
their
was
worker proposal system is what everyone references over and over again. So they have an interface for it. They have a way to stake and vote on stuff. They get stuff approved every month. They're pretty expeditious in their process. So I guess that's a more functional system as far as worker proposals than anything else.
All signs point to that being the baseline. And I personally am promoting the idea that we could have parallel side-by-side worker proposal systems, like a bank charter, like a sovereign entity gives banks permission to operate. Mm-hmm. So the EOS community can give permission for a worker proposal system to operate. And then you might want to have a separate emergency system that's whose scope is limited, a more general system, maybe a separate system for core developers for that kind of funding. Mm-hmm. But really early, frustratingly early, for all of us who are trying to make things happen.
Absolutely. Does anybody else want to chime in on the progress of that? Rob, Adam?
I haven't read the thing yet, so I don't have much to say, so I'll defer to Adam.
Oh, so yeah, with worker proposals, I've just been in there all day. As Roman says, it is very slow, and it's it's going to take a lot from the progress that it is at now. There's so many ideas that what Roman says is completely viable, and then running the same exact voting mechanism for approval for BPs could work. There's no way it hasn't even reached to determine how to approve worker proposals or even how they're going to be organized. So it's so early to even use them. So yeah.
And big up to Adam, I'd say, because you're one of the people in that group that's making sense. There's few, but I think there's just kind of right now what I've seen in that group is a little bit of lack of imagination. Just saying, and I appreciate bringing.
They're basing it off of older systems or examples of what's already been done, and not factoring in the system design and what's capable and EOS. They're like a bunch of UTXO older, coins, and how they've handled stuff, rather than be like, wow, we could actually put a lot of layers on top of this. And I almost liken it to how we're talking about having the voting portal with all these compliance badges, when you could do much of the same thing to automate, or at least make decision making a lot easier. So you could see like the history or some reputation of someone who had actually submitted worker proposals before, and badges of, their level of execution on previous projects. There's certainly a lot of things that can be done visually when people are voting on that. So, again, UX is gonna drive a lot of the adoption of this stuff. And, I think should be a big focus for the whole community, because that's what's hindered other communities. You go, no offense, I mean, it works very well. The dashboard that everyone references works very well, but doesn't look that great. It's not the best usability. It's okay, and it gets the job done. But if that's what we're shooting for, I mean, we need to shoot for like, enterprise class, like the best of the best, like, you know what I mean? So.
Oh yeah, you have to make it easy for people like me. I mean, it's like no one, has all the time in the day to just go searching through 50 Telegram channels to find like 3 people that said this wallet is approved, and then you go to the wallet and you're like, what the hell, like what do I do with this? How do I do anything? I mean, I know it's early days. I'm not trying to be the negative Nelly on the call. Just realities we need to face if we want people to vote, and we want people to do worker proposals. We want all these great things. We really have to make it easy for people, which is why, it's like when I was digging through websites trying to find out what BPs are compliant or not, it's like, yeah, you may have your BP JSON file, but what average person, the point of putting this compliant stuff on your website is so that anyone could go to your website and look at it, So it's like, yeah, you can put it in the root, it's in the root domain and stuff, and you could put /bp.json file, but how is any average user going to know that? There needs to be improvement, Steve. I think you're right. We need to make it easy for people.
It's not being listened to, honestly, because engineering culture that's secondary to HCI. A lot of the times they're not focused on that. You know what I mean? And that's the core culture that drives a lot of this stuff. You know what I mean? It just is. It's the same problem they have in the Valley with engineering heavy cultures. It's like, and that may be us in the community who are maybe not hardcore software developers, but maybe I'm a front-end engineer, Raleigh's a designer, maybe finding ways to make that easier, even for, to take the community feedback that we get, and having channels to collect that feedback from like the users, and then put that in a distilled kind of presentation layer to say, look, these are the big problems. How can we, come together to actually kind of remove this friction that we're having right now? And those remain to be seen, but I'd be interested beyond that. Like, we're kind of sticking on the worker proposal stuff. I also want to cover and kind of circle back on, expanding to a top 100 nodes, because there's a whole movement bubbling right now that everyone should know about basically a lot of those people from, I'd say 50 or 60 down to the 80s are, really wanting to get the word out to get more distribution of vote, and being left out of that conversation. And I was going to try to get Rob to expand his kind of thoughts on that, but it looks like he stepped away. So I was just going to try to get everybody here to maybe expand on their thoughts on that. And, what's the downside of that? If we let these guys go, some people are like, we'll go stand up our own chain and we'll go do our own thing. You know what I mean? And that's not good, this early in the process, so it's just kind of like the token situation, the token freeze. Is it worth it to not expand this, to tie it all up in bureaucracy and go on another 6 months and lose these people? And then, maybe not everyone, but a percentage goes off and stands up some, Helios chain or some whatever, the brother of EOS or something. And then we've lost all those people. And now we've got a side chain that may not be friendly to the ecosystem, or want to remove those things. And I just think that's totally like, it's not worth it to not include or try to find a path to compensation for some of those other people, because these are sharp guys that some of them who literally helped launch the chain. And it's just not right. It's totally not right. It would just be stupid to lose those early adopters. So anyways.
It's silly for the long-term value of the chain to lose all of these contributors that will be disillusioned in a sense because they don't feel that the voters have seen the value they've provided. Right. But on the flip side, we have to be patient too, because it takes a while for the stake to be unlocked. There's probably so many whales that would like to vote, and they're just like, no, I'm waiting for a hardware wallet, or, you know, they're just, there's a lot of stake on the sidelines still. So things could really change a lot. But yeah, I guess the problem is, as you mentioned, like some people are basically saying they're going to go under soon. And to me, well, that's really unfortunate. It almost seems like
weeding out the chaff.
Well, yeah, and it's also like we've all known what we were getting into, and that none of this is a shoe-in. So ideally, you should have operated from that perspective of, hey, you might want a runway of at least a few months to just in case. And I mean, you know, I don't want to be crass to anyone that is in that situation because it's unfortunate, but you know, it's a real risk that business should plan for in the space.
I agree with that. What do you think, Roman?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like the risk reward here, again, you know, I want to be respectful because I have very close friends who are hanging in there among the other BPs, but the risk reward ratio as an EOS block producer is somewhat favorable compared to general startup land. So, you know,
it's just kind of part of it. You know what I mean? If you didn't have the runway going into it, then you probably didn't understand what you were getting into to begin with. And I do see that. I definitely will be respectful to those who are in those situations, but I think that there is a group of people who saw it as an investment and something they could get into and kind of get in real quick and it would be all good. And now they're realizing like, wait, this is like startup territory. I have a full-time job. I can't waste all my money on this. And, you know, that they could just go hire an engineer to do it. It doesn't work that way. You know what I mean? And that's, you know, that was a lot of our operation and things that we looked at was like, well, how long can we go? Well, if we go with this other organization, they don't get on and we put all of our stock into them, you know, we end up with nothing, you know what I mean? Like really just a small percentage of our work. And then if we don't get elected, then we get either way. It was like lose. So in me and Eugene's case, we saw a lot of value in just like, here's the core two things that define a BP operation. And we can both do those for a long time. And we're solvent. We're not broke ourselves. I mean, we're not rich, but you know, we can keep going. We don't have to work 40, 50 hour weeks like these other people, consultants and hire senior level people. So we could do 20-hour weeks on our consulting, keep enough money coming in to put another 40 hours in the operation. And if you create culture like you guys have, and like, you know, we have, people come along with you and they understand that. They're like, oh, cool. Like it's a direct risk reward. Like if I put in work and I help, I'm going to be put on, you know what I mean? It's a lot more tangible. I think that that's more appealing to some people looking to jump on BP operations. There are a lot of people that are in the ecosystem. Like, and I can say this with Adam and Raleigh, that if you have strong culture, you can't fork that. You know what I mean? You can't, it's just, you know, it's the biggest and most important investment. That's what brought me and Raleigh together. That's what brought me and, you know, me and Eugene together, is that we kind of realized like, what if we could take all of our failures and the things we learned in leadership through all of our startup years in our 30s and just kind of put this into one thing and just create a lot of culture. And if we don't win, we'll have a voice, you know what I mean? And it'll be cool. You know, if we get in the top 30, it was cool. We kind of always had that attitude. I think Eugene was more towards the end, you know, expecting to get in that top 21, but after a few days, he was over it and ready to fight like like a Russian, you know what I mean?
a lot's going to change. There are exchanges just opening up their voting now. And like Rob said, there's whales sitting on the sidelines. So a lot's going to change. I think the general advice for BPs in the next 3 to 6 months are in that like 30 to 60 range is, you know, scaling down is as important as scaling up.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we're running, we're still in the cloud. 16 gig R4 large is on Amazon for now. I'm not sure how long 16 gigs of RAM is going to last, but we'll scale when we need to. And, you know, when some other plans execute, we'll be moving to bare metal as well. But for now, it's like, stay scrappy. Don't spend all your money up front. Don't have a high burn rate, because you don't know if you're going to be sitting down in 76 with EOS Detroit and the rest of us.
Golly, 76.
I know, dude, it's a travesty. That's another reason I was trying to get more of the guys down lower, like on this show tonight, and they couldn't. Rob was the only one that could make it, but I definitely.
It's all good.
It's not all good, honestly. Like, you should be at least where we're at, dude.
I mean,
straight up, Rodrigo. Like, I just want to say this to our audience. Like, you not only did you have one of the best presentations, but like, I'd been following you through Steemit, and you'd said you got a little later in on the witness stuff, so you didn't quite get enough traction. But you know, I always looked at you as one of the most helpful people when I first got into this back like January. You know what I mean? Like, and you were knowledgeable. You went to consensus when Dan presented this. You had a good relationship with Fuzzy and a lot of the core people in the community. And like, you're just a giver, you know, you like help people, man. And that's like what we need, you know, and it's not, unfortunately, people like you are not as aggressive in pushing your pulpit, you know, to using that pulpit to front run every new wallet or every new project that you didn't even do, that you've got your logo on. And we did it. And, you know, all these like just national, there's some of these guys' tactics, it works, but it's not in good taste.
Yeah, we're trying to stay tasteful. I learned, speaking of aggression, I was just on a panel with about four VCs earlier at Detroit Startup Week. It was blockchain and ICO, and you know, lots of good discussion. It seemed like everyone else on the panel was still like 2 or 3 years behind.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of aggression, though, like especially towards EOS. One of the guys, the first thing he said to me was, "EOS is a scam." He didn't even say hi. And I'm just like, the whole time I maintained my tact and professionalism. But what I realized was I needed to be more aggressive in that panel, because while I did get some pretty good EOS information out to the audience, because I was talking to them.
The perception, because we're in politics. So look at the politicians and everything that we don't like about how our country is run. And the end of the day, the A-types and the sociopaths define the message, you know, for the engineering, the designers, all of us who are the creators, you know. And it's sad that, you know, but we as a community need to learn from that. And even in our own communities, not be afraid to step up and be firm. And I've heard you do it sometimes. And when you're right, and you're very concise, nobody can fuck with you. But sometimes you have a hard time tapping into that. And I can relate to that. If you're an introvert.
I am an introvert.
You have
a lot of it. I don't go on the line too much, you know, like you won't see me on EOS Go too often, because I'd rather be like working in behind the scenes to make some stuff happen. But also, you know, this is my first rodeo as a
startup, right?
Founder and CEO. So it's like, oh shit, I have to be that guy now.
You got to be that guy. But you are like, that's the thing, is a lot of you guys, like Roman, I thought was just a developer book nerd for the rest of us. Cause I do it too. I have my introverted and extroverted phases where I'm out showing off my new thing. And then I get my dick knocked in the dirt and feel embarrassed and go back and get introverted for a few months. And then I go, but we have to go out every day.
Well, know? Steve, just right back at you. You've been doing amazing work for the whole ecosystem. The infographics you guys put out are invaluable.
That's Rally right there. That's all Rally.
That's what I was wondering too. So good job, Rally. Yeah, I mean, good design, you know, appealing design will really help us pull in the attention we need to have people stick around long enough to actually learn what this is and not just brush it off as a scam. All this week, we've actually been giving these things out, which are like little lessons about EOS, but in like human readable form. So if you open it up, it's got a whole sort of like breakdown of like governance, technology, community, incentives, kind of talks about all that. And then like, you know, little cards. What is EOS? So we're trying to, you know, we can focus on the echo chamber of the crypto world all day, or we can go out into the world and talk to people on the street. And right now, I mean, for a block producer, it's really smart to focus on the crypto world, right? Because that's where the voters are. So we have to balance that with, by the way, we also want to bring in a bunch of new users and get people stoked about what's coming, because it's going to change their lives and
I agree.
a lot of people's lives. So it's, what I'm hoping is we can go talk to the people on the street and show the voters we're doing that, and show them that's really valuable. And I think as we roll out decentralized apps, that will give us hard metrics that say, look, we've brought in 10,000 users. We can prove it. They came through our faucet. You know, we're measuring the retention. We're measuring, you know, how to keep people around, how to keep them engaged in EOS. That's kind of our long-term plan. We've been trying to put down roots for the long term and not feel like we have to be reacting too emotionally in the short term. But it's hard when you see like, oh, you know, I'm not getting the traction that I hoped I would. It makes you want to get emotional, but you know, I think we make the worst decisions sometimes when we're emotional. So you just have to keep a cool head and keep building value.
Absolutely. And I've always, go ahead.
People told us, like, we had a good couple of days, but though, you know, long game, you know, there's going to be a lot of fluctuation now, but when it wasn't looking, when we were in 41st place, people told us that we didn't do much marketing. And, you know, and it's true, we were building stuff, and it's really easy to sort of, especially for builders and for introverted nerds, to be like, yeah, I'm just going to build and people better notice and appreciate it. But I think the right attitude to have is good communication is like good manners, you know, because people are busy. EOS isn't their main thing in their lives necessarily. And if you have that communications part of your operation to give the right people the information they need, you should just look at that like good manners, not like you know, not like just this evil thing. Everyone likes to hate on marketers.
It's important. Yeah,
well,
you know, can have a great message, but if no one knows to listen in,
let's
deaf ears.
That's something I know a thing or two about. So I'm like a designer who started out in offset print, like 97, crawled my way out of the dungeons of print presses to realize by like 2003, I got pretty good at Photoshop, you know, and just doing flyers for music stuff that I did. I used to do underground shows in Dallas and a lot of music marketing. And, you know, MySpace came in, and basically by 2002, 2003, if you couldn't code a website, like, you didn't have a job. You know, I couldn't pay my rent at my apartment. I wasn't making enough off of my, you know, off of any of the print stuff that I was doing anymore. So I just started to learn to code front end, you know, and it was kind of a mess at that era, like 2001 to like 2004 is like right when web standards and Zeldman and them started to say, okay, guys, we got to like get our shit together. This is ridiculous. Like all this inline tables and content and just insanity. And, you know, I kind of got to a point like that's kind of the era that I learned about 2001, 2002 to about 2009. And my agency took off. Like it did really well. By 2008, 2009, I was hiring people. We did like 80,000 a month in revenue. I mean, we were killing it, like, you know, 15 people, big office in Deep Ellum, down where Mark Cuban used to office in the arts district, you know, and it was cool. You know, I lived that life. You know, I got to taste what that was like, going to the conferences, all that stuff. And what I learned is that, you know, because I had the heart of a designer and then learned to develop, but then I kind of got thrown into marketing, you know, where I was like, oh crap, like my clients wants a local SEO campaign, or oh crap, my client wants a link acquisition or digital PR campaign. Oh, and I had to learn all this technical marketing like really fast from like 2007, 2006 to by like 2009. I was getting asked to speak at PubCon, and those are legit conferences. Like Brett and them will not let you on if you're half-assed. It's just the way it is. You're verified if you're on those tracks. So they knew I was technical, but I didn't have the heart of these spreadsheet people, man. They're the other side of it. They're not creative, a lot of them, not all of them, but they can't design anything. They're not particularly, like, they're creative in different ways, not to detract from them. They're just creative in other strategic ways that are not commonly the developer, engineer, HCI people that we know on the comp sci side of the house, right? They know some of that stuff, but they just pick out what they need to execute and could care less about the reasoning behind the system design or the usability or whatever. They just want to get the site to rank and convert. And as long as it drives revenue, they won. And that being in those tracks, one of the things that I didn't like is just how disingenuous that marketing is in general, that a lot of that era of marketing, mid 2000s to like mid, early 2012. And then the algorithms came in. You had Google Panda and Penguin, and they all lost their shit. They thought it was the end of the world. And any of us that was paying attention saw that Google with their RankBrain, and TensorFlow was what they gave away. But these were just sentinels of training data for different search verticals, that were basically, putting different, split testing in real time in different buckets for the SERPs, the search engine results pages. So they were culling down on all the spam, which needed to happen. They needed to do that, for the user experience. But that culture of gamesmanship and putting the result and the monetary result above the user experience and your brand promise and like your mission and all that stuff, it just like, that's why I left, because those were not my people. You know what I mean? I came up very quick in it. Within a year or two, I was on all the conferences and it was great. And all of them are like, why did you leave? And like a few of them I'm trying to bring over here that I really dug, that were cool, like Michael King and guys that I always big up, like that I'm trying to get them to come over to this side, because I'm like, you're sharp, but no offense, but to a lot of those people, like they just wasn't my bag, and that's, people don't respect marketing. And I think that when you go do it and you really understand all the inputs, there's certainly a reason that UX people and a lot of, engineers don't respect marketing, and it's justified, but it's needed. You know what I mean? And I think that's why you're seeing growth hackers eat their lunch. The old school marketers, now the programmers are figuring out all those inputs and automating it and saying, you know what? We don't have to deal with you anymore. No offense, but you come over to this side and figure it out. You guys can stay over there. Good luck. And I don't disagree with that. That's happening right now. And they're all like, what do we do? Google's taking all of paid search, and, AI is automating all of our display. And like, we have no base anymore. It's like, if you were still standing on that ground and not seeing it fall out from underneath you, you deserve to fail. And it's happened a bunch of times in different areas. Desktop publishing in the 90s. Like, we've seen this a bunch of times. And there's just a group of people who perpetually chase the wave instead of getting ahead of it. And I missed it myself. I was so dug into my agency that I couldn't let go of 15 people. These are like, they depend on me to pay their mortgage, man. It's like real serious. Like, I get bad reputation for that. So I had to slowly like kill my agency and get it down to just 2 or 3 core guys. I'm on my last contract for like the next 4 months, and I'm done with all of the contracts I had, everything. And it's all 1099, just all consulting. And I mean, it's been the most relieving thing that I've experienced in the last 6 months being in this ecosystem than I experienced in the last 16 years. And I mean that, because I just perpetually chase that wave, trying to feed the monster of the business and not really feeding myself. You know what I mean? And it was the biggest disservice that I did to myself as an entrepreneur, to not have enough balls to just cut it and move on and change my model and pivot into what I was passionate about. And that was probably the most potent message that I learned out of that, in my early 40s now, that I just try to impart on all entrepreneurs. A big part of why I've mentored Adam is to save him from them. Are you happy doing what you want to do? And that's one of the reasons I love this community so much, because I even though all of us from 46, from even up in the 20s, like Roman, down to the 70s, we're all excited. We're all very excited on where this could go. And I feel like we're all doing our life's work. We're doing the best work, and the things that we're passionate about. We're moving in a direction that is exciting. And I know when I feel that in a community, I'm in the right place. And it's been, and honestly, and I'm not trying to get sappy here, Katie, everybody who's on the call still, like, I haven't ever in my entire career found my people. And if you know what that feels like, if you've ever been through it, a long career, first part of your career where, because we have different phases of our career. We have the first part of career, we do a lot of fulfillment and busy work, and we kind of reporting and stuff. And we go into our second part of our career, we're doing a lot of directing and managing and hiring. And like, you go into the third part of your career, it's kind of your third act, like Phil Mesnier said at the House, where he's like, this is like the best work of my life. I feel like I've done my magnus opus. And, you know, just to even see that that's possible, because in the second part of your career, you don't know if you're going to get that, you know, like you're just like, well, I'm just going to be a middle management guy. This is what I am, you know, and it's like to see that that's possible, that you can keep doing this work and community can lift you up in such tangible ways. That's really cool. So I didn't mean to go off on a big diatribe there, but that's a lot of us that are in this, you know, need to hear that. You know what I'm saying? Because they're all coming from a similar place of like, you know, you're in your first startup, obviously, Rob. I'm sure Roman has the battle scars far beyond just crypto lines. And I might be somewhere in the middle. And Adam's just like starting out and hasn't even worked at his first startup. He's still getting out of Rutgers University himself. So it's a good little mix of people in different career positions. But all of you out there listening know that, you know, that's, you know, get involved in EOS, man. If you feel it in your heart, you feel that vibe and you're like, man, like, this is really interesting. Like, these are my people. Like, it is possible.
You can live a happy life doing the DAX work. I mean, for like a year, I haven't worked. I actually used to work for another tech company, Duo Security.
They're dope.
Pretty awesome.
Stuff, yeah.
And I was just like, you know, I'm going to leave this cushy job and just work on, you know, I was working on Steam stuff at the time, but I'm just going to work on building out witness infrastructure, block producer infrastructure, evangelizing, just seeing if I can scrape by on crypto. And so far, so good. I'm still here.
You said you're all crypto? You're like totally.
Yeah, I don't have a day job. Yeah. So I just work on EOS Detroit all the time from sun up till sundown. And, yeah, it's fun.
How is that?
I wouldn't choose any other lifestyle.
How does that work for you, Roman? Like extending on my story, my life story, I just gave out there. What I want to know specifically, what is your experience in building companies or working in your field, and in relation to that, like what brought you here? You know?
Well, you know, I don't know where I should start. Like I was programming from a really young age. When I was 19, I started earning as much money as my parents ever earned as a developer in the mid 90s in New York.
Nice.
Then I got really burnt out. And after I got my degree, like I was working, I did it completely backwards. First I was working, then I got my degree, then I went into the military. I was just like looking for adventure, wanted something completely different. So my software career was interrupted by 6 years in the Army. And then I went back to software, was in business with a psychopath. I'm sure he was a psychopath. And I would encourage every young entrepreneur, maybe Adam, to either read The Mask of Sanity or just read a bunch of other articles about psychopathy. 1% of people are psychopaths, so we all know a handful. And it's just good to know that there are people like that are that different from you, because I think we take for granted that most of the people around us will react the same way to the same stimuli. So yeah, that was like two years of my life and pretty much my life savings, but no big deal. It was about the time and cost of business school. Mm-hmm. So then I was
experience myself. Yeah, I partnered with somebody who's just like impossible to work with, like no compromise, like just horrible. So I can relate to that.
Yeah, I'm always spotting them now. Like I never stop like thinking like, you know, I'm a little hypersensitive, but that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And there's good strategies for dealing with psychopaths. And again, it's 1% of the population. So we all know a handful.
Thanks for the book recommendation.
Yeah, I want to write it down.
Mask of Sanity. Yeah, so, you know, I had a little Bitcoin lottery. I thought it was a really cool idea where you bet which miner is going to solve a block that ends in 7. So every 90 minutes you say, is it going to be slush pool? Is it going to be another pool? So it was a really fun idea, but we were a little too late to market. Like when it was still the GPU era, it was like big excitement. Like, is this pool going to win? Is that pool going to win? And we wanted to build on that excitement. But for what I got for that failure was a relationship with my co-founder Bogdan. We've known each other for 10 years now.
You said he's a DJ?
He's also a DJ, yeah. And like that, our relationship, I think, is as trustful as relationships get. So it's like you were saying before, if you have a good culture, a lot's possible. So just my relationship with him, the fact that we trust each other so like totally and thoroughly makes a lot of things easier. And we're kind of, I think Crypto Alliance is growing around the two of us.
It's similar for me and Eugene, as far as just like our original vision and where we wanted to be, but also like, being deliberate with your time on this earth, man. We don't, your life is your currency in this life, in this world. And if you spend that on somebody else's dream, and, what have you done? So I think there's in your late 30s or something, I've been telling Adam this, that you kind of go through this, like, it's not necessarily a midlife crisis, but there's this, feeling of like, what is my legacy? You don't really worry about that in your 20s, but you start going into your mid to late 30s and you're like, what have I done? Like, I've just like built a bunch of crap, for all these other people, but I haven't really done anything like good for the world. So you start asking those questions, and I've tried to, foster a culture of like mentorship and accountability where, everyone in our tribe like could just say what sucks, even if we don't like it and it irritates us. And it keeps us looking at how people look at us from the outside.
In terms of motivation, I'll recommend another book, The War for Art by Stephen Pressfield. And it's mostly advice for artists and creative types. But he writes, it's a very heartfelt account where he writes how he was in his early 40s and had nothing, no career, no family, no big prospects. And what I like what he said was just how hard it is, like how you need to stop like looking up to the sky about all the great things you make, and just look down at your work and just slog through it, grind through it. And the one little part that I always tell myself again from that book is he says, once you've chosen your goal, stop thinking about success, just focus on the grind. And success is something that sneaks in quietly through the back door when you're not paying attention.
Yeah, I always say
that's helped me, that little line.
Shoot for the moon, land on the mountain. It's success and money are an outcome of being useful and helpful to people. And if you focus more on the work and helping people and creating a lot of value, those just come. I mean, that's how I built my web design agency. And we all started agencies back then, a little web shop in the early 2000s. I'm no different than anybody else. I was just in a B2B market and it worked. It kept going, and I just happened, I wasn't in a city where that wasn't advantageous at some point. Dallas is 2 or 3 years behind, usually on whatever the trends are, technology, or it's just a little bit behind. It's less so now, but at that time especially. And I was able to make good money, in a B2B market, and I did pretty well for a while. And then I just kind of got over it by like 2011, 2012, I was stuck in my business. And I love the idea of these DACs. Community owns the end product, and it's really cool. So are you working on any DACs, Roman?
We're working on smaller, more modest projects, like being able to put a random selection on chain. This has already come up a few times in the community. There was a talk with the launch that we would select randomly from anybody who wants to launch. Before there was that big argument between BIOS and Ghostbusters. So we have a little project that just lets you select randomly on chain and put the whole selection on chain. We're customizing a game that we didn't build, but we have the permission and cooperation and enthusiasm of the creator. So we're gonna put a game on the jungle testnet.
Nice.
Leo, I forget his last name, but he made this really cool game with monsters. It's like a Tamagotchi game where you have an electronic pet. So it was actually his idea.
Yeah.
He says, if you do the artwork, we can make it a custom jungle animal game. So I think that'll be cool, and it'll, like, you know, if Jungle is still active, it'll be it'll have value for testing. So part of making it active might be to put this cool little game on it.
It's nice.
Yeah, we do have bigger plans, but most of my focus lately has been starting to do media. So thank you very much for the invite to the show. It was very timely. And the other part of my focus was just building the organization and getting access to good people from my previous, you know, projects and jobs.
Thank you, man. We do genuinely appreciate all your hard work for the community. And
back at you. It's
like, I second that.
Third.
So you mentioned Leo. He was actually working on the Cocoa project with Adam. Adam came to me about 2.5 months ago with basically Quora for the blockchain was the initial concept, and he was just fielding people in the community and what they thought about it. And you know, I didn't really say much. Like the first week, I just kind of watched people in the feed, and then it wasn't really going anywhere. And the ideas that were being presented were, I don't think enough people in the group understood even the basics of how DPoS worked. They were just learning themselves. And I finally just said, like, this isn't going to work. We should do this. We should structure it like this. And basically where it's at now is much different than our initial idea. But Leo had actually come on as part of that core team earlier on. He's now on another project, but yeah, he does great work. I mean, that, you know, Elixir and some of the stuff that the functional programming that he does is awesome. And he did a great job on that game for sure. So what are you working on, Rob? Any dApps or DAX?
Yeah. We're in an R&D phase. So what we'd like to do is, there's actually been a lot of academic research built up around it already for Ethereum, which is nice because we can read a lot of white papers and kind of distill some of that. But there's a local meshnet called the Equitable Internet Initiative here in Detroit. And currently it's grant funded. And we'd like to create, or at least experiment with creating a new incentive model for it that will allow it to sustain and grow. And that would probably have a token economic model where Wi-Fi providers who are basically reselling their bandwidth back into the mesh net would be earning tokens. And then people who want to access the internet services would be spending those same tokens. So creating supply and demand around a token, which we've just been calling net just internally. And then it's kind of it's an ambitious project, but it's one way where we can partner with a community organization. Haru on our team actually sets up some of that meshnet equipment. So this is more of a long range project for us. It's going to take, we're looking to have a white paper by the end of the summer, basically. Nice. But yeah, it kind of goes back to what I said earlier about putting down more long-term roots. We want to, rather than building yet another wallet, because I'm sure there's a ton of effort going into awesome wallets. I know Black One's working on, phone wallets and all kinds of stuff. So it's like, let's do something that we haven't heard anyone is onto yet. And that's kind of why we decided that. And it also feeds into, our vision is that EOS will bring economic opportunity to a lot of people, like a new form of it. But anyone who can't access the internet readily is going to miss out. So if we lower the cost of accessing the internet here in Detroit, which has a pretty large population that aren't internet connected, that will enable us to actually affect maybe the people who need things like EOS the most. Yeah, and I mean, some of the retort I get to that is like, oh, what about these? Like, people have these, can't they get on the internet through this? And my response is usually like, that's a different relationship with the internet. When you're using apps on your mobile, I don't know, I would never want to write long form on my mobile phone. I'd never want to contribute to Everapedia on my mobile phone. It would just be horrible. But figuring out how we can actually create, you know, a lower cost internet here is what we're after. And, you know, I think that we haven't been talking too much about it because we don't want to put out a bunch of information and be really loud until we're ready to really go to market with it.
Hey, Adam, listen to that. What have I been telling you, man? Step out when you got something. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, that's, you know, all cowboy and no horse. So.
Yeah, it sucks having the pressure, because once you've let the cat out of the bag, then you've got people prodding you, asking for updates. Like, you've got all this additional pressure you didn't actually need yet. Yeah, so we've got Charlie, our CTO, is basically full-time working on that. He's chasing down the spec right now. Our chief community officer, Ingrid, will be working on solidifying the partnership with EII. And yeah, I mean, we've got a handful of devs we can bring in too locally that are just chomping at the bit to get involved, but we're trying not to scale our team too fast because we're already 10 large. So it's already a fairly large startup team.
Uh-oh, Fuzzy. I summoned the Fuzzy.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. And guess who else we got on? Steam Witness Virtual Growth. So this just got epic. Wow. We've got Rob Consdorf, we've got Fuzzy, and we've got Virtual Growth. Can you hear us, Virtual? Hello? He's here, but we can't hear him. What's up, Fuzzy? What are you doing?
Loving life, guys. Just enjoying the ride. How about you?
Same, man. Just trying to talk about this crazy week that just transpired. Basically, just milling over where everyone's head's at, and we would certainly like to hear your take on it. So, what do you think about the cluster fail of the last 7 days?
I don't think it was a cluster fail. I actually think it was a how do I say this? I think it was part of a long journey that we've already been on for a while, but I think we realize, and we will continue to realize more and more, how long of a journey it is. So that's what I'll say. I think that we've actually done, the community came together and did some things that is definitely not considered normal for blockchains, but at the same time, Dan's never made it, Dan's always made it clear that he's trying to make self-governance possible. He's trying to essentially do what he thinks the founding fathers would have done for America if there were blockchains at that time, right? So I think that it's part of our history. I think it's going to be very interesting to see the ride. I'm looking forward to it, man. Okay. I don't think that this was at all anything but growing pains.
No, I would agree with that. It just, in the moment, feels like a cluster fail.
Well, you know, the great thing is, though, that everybody's passionate about it. And what does that tell you? That because everybody's passionate, they all care. So it doesn't mean that they're dropping EOS anytime soon. Kind of irony, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what have you been up to? Oh. Go ahead, Adam.
I have something to say, but it's like it can really start a big like snowfall from here. So first, let's see.
Sounds like a horrible idea, but please continue.
Okay, so the next bridge that it's gonna have to be crossed is addressing how BPs will handle RAM scaling, and what are they gonna like? It's a whole market that's unregulated, and there's going to be opportunities to just take advantage on insider information about this. Like I was reading like in the EOS BP infrastructure Telegram, they were like talking about it earlier, that there's like BPs out buying RAM now, like on like through the like resources, but then what are they going to do when they just essentially drive the price of RAM all the way up, and then out of nowhere just come out with like another 128 gigs of RAM on their nodes, and then all of a sudden they just sold 2 days before and RAM's worth nothing now because they just like flooded the market with RAM. So this is something that I think should be figured out.
I think the free market will figure it out. personally.
Yeah. Yeah. So like one thing you could do is detect. So if that discussion's happening on totally transparent BP calls that are live streamed, you could easily correlate. Well, probably, I guess someone could be using an account that isn't associated to their BP identity. So that would actually make it very difficult. But I was going to say, I mean, for some cases, if they're using known accounts associated with that identity, with that person, you could see like, oh, something was discussed on this call. And then, well, and if those calls are live, then anyone could take advantage if there's like RAM scaling being discussed. Like it's basically whoever gets there first. Information asymmetry is kind of part of free markets. I mean, but if things are happening behind closed doors and then, a bunch of BPs are getting rich off of camping RAM, that's definitely not in the best interest of the network, and the voters should respond.
Absolutely.
So I don't know. There's probably sophisticated ways the BP could go undetected, like laundering their tokens through exchanges to deassociate them from their known identities, and then doing this activity from, an unlinked identity or account, basically. But, I'm not trying to give anyone ideas. I'm just saying, like, it's really hard, right? This is why strong identity will allow us to do a lot of cool stuff on blockchains we can't yet, because then we can say, nope, you have to be a vetted individual.
Pretty much. So that's an interesting, I mean, do you guys think what do you think the biggest, I've heard people say that Sybil attacks and the RAM problem is probably the most sketchy thing that's a legitimate concern. And that could be an argument for, expanding the BP list to 100, because that would be maybe less of a problem. What do you guys think? Is that real or perceived?
It doesn't keep me up at night.
Cool. Well, what are you working on right now, Fuzzy? What was the last conversation that we had about? Are you there, Fuzz?
Yeah, I'm here.
What was the last conversation about the new project that you're working on? I was going to give you a chance to shill your stuff.
Oh, well, what I wanted to do was Dan offered, pretty much offered an opportunity to people and said that he wanted a forum, essentially, on Steam while they were working on other things for EOS. And we were saying, well, Steam, we actually run a forum off of EOS called EOS Talk, right? And Katie actually told him about it and reminded him that it was right there waiting. So the problem, though, that we ran into is that the nodes on Steam aren't really the best to work with. So we have some improvements coming out with respect to the code base behind the scenes, and we're going to be launching an EOS Talk chain that we're going to use. We use the EOS bits. They are rewarded to people who participate in community initiatives that we've been doing for the past year. I also use Beyond Bits, but that's not going to be a share drop item in this. But we're going to basically have the Pirate Bay of forums where anybody can launch their own front-end forum for it, and they'll be able to do it directly on the chain. It'll be share dropped on the EOS community. We'll work to, I'm going to use any stake that I get if you guys vote me in as a witness, to create a token, a whale token, because we've created tokens on Steam a long time ago, about a year ago, and we can use these on all mutual aid society based chains. So we're going to have that. We're going to distribute tokens to people who help us sidechain to EOS and make it possible that for pretty much anybody then to be able to follow in the footsteps of sidechaining to EOS if they're running their own depots-based chain that's off of that that code base.
So define for people who don't know, like, what do you mean by sidechain? For people maybe listening who are like, what in the hell are y'all talking about?
Yeah. Well, the thing that's awesome about delegated proof of stake chains is that they can connect up with another blockchain, and they can interact with the other blockchain, and the other blockchain can actually become kind of a partner in swapping tokens back and forth, right?
You're not talking about inter-blockchain communication?
That's where we're going. But we want to make a way where we can reward people and give them a place where we can essentially kind of have, like, I mean, look at the Pirate Bay, right? It's pretty hard to take down because you have the piratebay.se.org.info, all kinds of, right? You could pretty much type a bunch of different domain names in there, and the Pirate Bay's there, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to offer streaming on the forums. We're going to use tokens in the network to reward people who help us with extra stuff on it. But we're going to make it so it's open for anybody to run their own EOS Talk forum. And we're going to kind of decentralize it, and we're going to make it so it's holders of EOS, right? But it's going to be a side chain, a chain that interacts with EOS, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to then have this ability to essentially have a free marketplace of thought and discussion where anybody can have their own forums, and they can have their own categories in the forums and their own moderation and all that good stuff, right? So if people hate how Fuzzy moderates the forum, maybe he likes the way Doug does, right? Because I might be an asshole to some people. Like you actually might find that's the case. So they would have the ability to go to another forum that actually has similar content. And we're going to be giving tokens. We're not going to do an ICO because we have the code base there. We have everything we need. We have a team who cares about it, and we're going to be dropping on it. So
nice.
Yeah, and of course, if the community ever wanted to fund the creation of something that competes on EOS itself because they think that's a good idea, then of course they're more than welcome to do it.
And
nice.
you know what I loved about it when Fuzzy was telling me about this is there's a lot of, with side chains, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity there. Maybe for some BPs will go over to, to work with these side chains, and for someone like me who I just write articles, right? And maybe I want to say something and I don't feel safe on the EOS mainnet chain. I don't know why I wouldn't, but maybe I wouldn't. And I just want free journalism on a side chain that supports journalists and supports people that are really just trying to get to the truth of the matter, I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, I kind of like it as the Pirate Bay because if you think about it, it just kind of lets anybody kind of frame the information in their own way too, right? And if we can do that and we offer the community, this is another thing that I'll keep telling people. When you look at Bitcoin, a lot of people don't realize, but Bitcoin largely got as big as it did because of the forks. Like that's why Dan actually says, hey, the market cap of Bitcoin includes all these other Bitcoin forks that share dropped essentially 100% onto Bitcoin, right? So essentially every time that you get, well, really pretty much any coin that share dropped. So when you give tokens to like in new communities to Bitcoin holders, you're essentially creating communities who want to go and talk about what you're doing and how we can create synergy from it, right? And they want to advertise it and tell people more about it. And when they do that, it creates a network effect and it creates more value for everybody because all these different communities can synergize and create value for one another because this community, my community, might not be the perfect one for this certain specific demographic, right? But another community that's dropped, from another team, and they'd step back just like I do. And everybody says, okay, this is a different community and a different culture. You might catch different fish with that culture. Right. And ultimately, like I always told Dan, and I'm pretty sure Dan agreed with me, actually. I don't see why he wouldn't have, though. But it really comes down to whenever we look on CoinMarketCap and these other websites, when we realize that all of them are delegated proof of stake based and powered chains and dApps, we know that we've basically become the standard, right? So the more chains that are competing and keeping open source solutions that all other chains can leverage, the better. That's why I think it's kind of funny, because I sit here and after so long, everybody gets so riled up, and it's like, guys, there's trillions of dollars just hanging there as a piñata that's just waiting for us to open it up. And it's like, if people actually think we're not going to have enough when we bust down this piñata, there's going to be a lot of candy that falls out. I don't think anybody's going to be able to fill their own bellies with it. And I don't think we want anybody to fill their entire belly with it, because it might kill them. So
I have a different perspective. I mean, this is where me and Fuzzy have always pretty much butted heads, and I'm much more into the use cases and real world applications and adoption, whereas Fuzzy kind of approaches it from the little micro community Bitcoin era. And not that the things he isn't doing aren't innovative within that, but there's a whole group of people that come into this with, Fuzzy's never run a business himself. You know what I mean? He got crypto rich and did well for himself, and he's put a lot of his life into this space and a lot of passion, and he helps a lot of people. But in a traditional business structure and a P&L and managing a business, he's never done that. So there's a lot of people who bring business experience into the space, and then there's people who haven't really run businesses, and they approach it from the community perspective and the network effects that drive value in the tokens, but aren't really looking outside of that. And that's kind of the crux of our where we butt heads. I would be interested to see, Roman, did you do blockchain stuff prior to this? You said that you had done some mining.
First off, I disagree with you on that. Real quick, because I can't.
That's my perspective. That's my.
I can't let you off that easily.
Put you in a box. Sorry about that.
I'll say this: business is changing, and you've said this multiple times to me.
I agree. No,
so be very careful, because we all need each other.
Oh, absolutely. I'm talking about just,
go ahead and go
what
back.
I'm trying to say, let me clarify that. What I'm trying to say is there's people that come from just a traditional, this is how you run a business, you make payroll, you do all this stuff, and they're kind of bringing some of those perceptions. If you haven't studied the space and seen all these nuances, and I give you credit for that, Fuzzy, for opening my eyes about more, when you start with community, Satoshi 10, don't go take 50%, 70% of the tokens like these Ethereum guys. I always give you credit for that. I'm just saying, I'd be interested. Did you work on
which mining pool is going to find the block? Right. And we built a sort of public block explorer. That it was something that we needed to build anyway to support the lottery, but neither of those projects were successful. What I got out of them was, it was just a lot of experience and the priceless relationship that I have with my Crypto Lions co-founder.
That was the first project y'all collaborated on, but you have previous business experience. I mean, you've had your own startups and you've worked for people.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no big wins, but a lot of experience and some small wins.
Oh, that's okay. What I'm trying to say is, do you perceive that too, that a lot of people, it seems like in Bitcoin, it was thoroughly crypto and cap people who were trying to change and push these new behavioral and economic models forward and kind of were anti-establishment to some degree in their candor. Whereas you're seeing a lot of people come into EOS that do have some business or startup experience who maybe want to integrate a little bit more and not necessarily topple the system, but just try to change things that are inefficient and bad about the system. So there's kind of two sides, these two communities, from the hardcore BitShares and Steemit communities to people you're seeing in EOS are some of it, this is their first blockchain that they've really.
I do get that vibe, and I suspect that some of them are the same people. We haven't been idle for the last 10 years. I think a lot of those people did gain a lot of experience. But yeah,
absolutely.
it seemed like Bitcoin was like this small group of people like building it and making it happen, and then a huge community around it that was overwhelmingly libertarian. I got paid my first Bitcoin writing for a libertarian magazine.
Nice.
And now it seems like the core is a lot bigger and a lot more professional and experienced.
Of Bitcoin or just crypto in general?
Now I'm thinking of EOS mostly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the point.
Bitcoin was the small center with a big community around it, like finally discovering an alternative or like a sort of escape hatch away from the banking system.
Mm-hmm.
And then like this has now been with us for 10 years, and now you have a lot of serious business people as well as the ideologues, and we need all of them. It's a big ecosystem.
Absolutely. And I'd be the first to say that. And, it's exciting to see that convergence, because rather than us all just fighting, we're actually collaborating. I mean, we might butt heads or not agree on some little micro topic, but for the most part, like, we're learning from each other. Like, I'm learning from Fuzzy's learning from my perspective, and that kind of like melding of a lot of different minds and communities is going to create a lot of cool outcomes. I'm very interested to see kind of what happens. So I don't know.
Have you guys ever seen the TED Talk? I think it's called "When Ideas Mate" or "When Ideas Have Sex." It's one or the other.
I mean,
I believe so. Yeah.
Well, it just brings a good point to mind. It's like, that's precisely what's happening. You're making idea babies, and that's what we do. And this is the type of stuff that scares the hell out of people.
Some of them have orphans, though.
Well, many orphans, of course. But, of course, I won't get into the dark side of it. But luckily, Luckily, ideas are not like babies in that regard. But the point of the matter still is that when we walk around with an open mind and we recognize the places where we all, where we need help, I think that's where we're going to, that more collaborative space, right? Where people recognize, hey, we can access more information. We can access help from one another. We can reward it and not have it always taxed to the degree that it's been taxed, and our interactions held down. And that's kind of where humans really thrive, right?
Right.
So
absolutely.
Hell yeah. But anyway.
You have any comments, Adam? I've see you've been pretty quiet the whole feed. I'd give you a chance to kind of give your commentary on the last few weeks and just your take on this space.
Yeah. So my take on the space is it's very welcoming and inviting. I remember like when I just had my idea of Coco, I was like going around. I couldn't even find where the Ethereum community is. and then I knew about EOS and I wasn't like, it was just still like a beta thing to me. So I was just kind of in it, but never really like active. And then I remember like trying to find out, and then it really was just like a snowball. Like you just, like once you actually get involved and start to reach out, it's like everyone is just always welcoming to you. I remember seeing you, I PM'd you and then you answered me and I was like, okay, this is a surprise. Like I wasn't expecting to get answers from people like this. I was just like,
I remember that specifically. You're like, hey, does this suck? And I was like, actually, I like that. That's a good idea. Like that is actually a decent, because I had a lot of people hit me up the last 2 or 3 months. Let's do this step. Let's do this step. And no offense, but a lot of them just aren't very good ideas. They're just not. They either wouldn't work, or the tokenomics wouldn't work, or there's no reason to have a token. So,
I've been mulling a tokenomics question over for a long time. Maybe I should have brought this up earlier in the show because we're closing in on 2 hours. But it's not at all obvious to me what the best way to do like a boring SaaS product as a token business. And the problem is this: like like most of the dApps you see, their power is from the community. Like Wikipedia is the community, BitShares is the community. But let's say it's something on the level of like accounting software. Could you do, which is normally a monthly subscription, and if it's open source, you don't have a business model because companies will just run it for free. So could you do something on the level of accounting software? Like what might the tokenomics look like? Or do you just have to maybe not make it open source or make parts of it closed source?
Dan talked about this, in the meeting the other day, and he was like, you have to look at a lot of these tokens as like just a settlement, layer between chains, for value. And that's all that it is. It doesn't necessarily have to like reward people. It could just be literally like, an accounting layer, to have very, very accurate granular accounting. And that's the purpose of the token. And having inter-blockchain communication and being able to talk and settle on other chains. If you could look out 10 years in like I said in the happy interview, like a Uber-fied, logistics world where everything's basically, most of these, obviously semis are all automated. There's AI, and self-driving cars, and those are owned by independent operators in different regions, and it's a lot more distributed. Like you've heard that word, microeconomies. It's very much like a lot of little microeconomies that each have their own individual tokens. That's really part of a reward system and an accounting layer. And then, that enables like a much more like liquid, economy around a particular area, but you may not be able to use that token for anything like outside of it. So then you would have like the Bitcoins and the Ethereums and the EOS that are like the platform tokens or the currencies that are the ultimate like settle, where you would cash out basically for whatever that value was. So that dynamic I think will continue to move forward. But and I credit this to Fuzzy early on. My idea, I was like, oh well, I'll just take like 40% of the token supply and split 20% with this guy and 20% this guy. He's like, no, dude, Satoshi 10. Like you only keep 10-20%, for worker proposals, exchange liquidity and like bounties. But you don't ever keep like that much of the token. It's not going to work. And I really didn't understand, because I'm coming from Ethereum and Bitcoin world. So I was like, well, why not? They do it. And he's like, yeah, but look at what happens in the next 5 years. I give you a guarantee 90% of those projects aren't going to be worth shit, because it was just a big pump and dump and consolidation. And that causes a loss of faith in the community. And the community is actually what drives the value.
So I'd be curious to hear from anybody on the call, what's the standard for an airdrop? How much do you keep for operations and to reward entrepreneurial risk?
Can I give you a real quick clarification? I just want to make sure that that this is made clear. I will never say, and I don't think I ever said never do it. But what I will say is this: it's a very dangerous thing to do, in my opinion, if you don't have a plan already and like set up, where you are essentially like, let's say in phase 1, once the community reaches these goals, I am going to burn 20% of my tokens, right? Or something to that effect. You want to have a plan, a roadmap for getting rid of your tokens or a large portion of economics. But I will say that you're right. You have to be very careful, because what happens in crypto, man, like we look at everywhere in crypto and we're always talking about decentralization. And here we are, like every frigging chain is almost all like 40% plus is owned by a small group of people. And it's like, well, that's fine, but that's a republic of chains. But if you really care about a chain and a big platform like what you guys are talking about, like the mega city, right, where everybody goes and brings their township's goods to cash in for the special gold primo, when they go there, that's when you want to have all that stuff, right? That's where you want to have all the infrastructure in place and helping that.
There's also a math that I'm realizing, and me and Adam went through a lot. We had a guy pop in and actually kind of break down the Steemit model of inflation and how it's balanced with the token supply. So if you have a certain amount of tokens, that can actually affect price as it gets listed on exchanges, as it has more liquidity. The issue is that if you don't watch and depos systems, like the balance of inflation and payout, and how that's getting distributed. I think that's why they were so anal about the 1% with EOS, because you're going to have a lot of people dumping, and that's going to dilute the price. A lot of token holders worry about that. So finding that balance of what inflation is paid out to the network for actual rewards for people to use it versus what is allocated out of the inflation to, build the network and worker proposals and things outside of that has to be really, really strategically balanced from my research. And I don't claim to be this expert mathematician, but in looking at the numbers, there's a lot of smart people who've put time into balancing these chains, Dan and a lot of the people that have contributed to what, Steemit, BitShares, and their flaws. If you look at why they failed, there was a lot of consolidation. And what happens is they take that 30-40%, they just continue to consolidate more and more. And that can be dangerous in confidence on the chain. So there's a lot of behavioral stuff at play. It's not purely that people overnight are just going to ditch the chain. It's just a slow lack of confidence over time, plus like diluting the actual value of the token itself that's at play, and you have to kind of balance that, really good.
I think I want to make a clarification. I think Steem and BitShares are very different on that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So like, whereas, and I want to make it real clear, like there's been a lot longer for people to divest in BitShares.
Right.
So I think that the control is a little bit less decentralized. Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to the days that Steem and Steemit decide that they're going to say, hey, we're going to give the majority of this back to the community and decentralize it further.
I would agree with that. I would agree that BitShares is absolutely more so distributed then. But people have complained that both of those versions of Dan's ideas were not ideal in terms of what he's implementing now with EOS. So a lot of is that did that answer your question, Roman, at all? Or
well, okay, 30-40 is too high. 10 there's a strong precedent for, because that's what Block 1 kept. EOS DAC did 25%. I'm curious. I haven't done any deep look into these numbers. These are just the ones that have come across. So I'm curious what people think is about right. Although it probably depends on the project, how much operational expenses they will have and stuff like that.
I would agree. And also token supply. So, what's your user adoption rate? How many people are going to be using it? Do you suspect? Because that could still be factored into some model. And that's, it remains to be seen. I think we're in our first 10 years of this. So even the models that we're basing stuff on may not be the most ideal for how we should set this stuff up. So,
And then even with burning, some people are starting off with this 10%, and then they end up burning half their tokens or something just through their initiatives. And then they actually end up not really having more 30-40% or something just through the hidden message there.
Yeah. Well, cool, guys. This was an awesome feed.
Wait. You have to give me 2 minutes. You have to give me 2 minutes before we go.
You do.
Right. I know everyone's tired. This circling way back to the beginning of the conversation, we're talking about freezing the accounts. We're talking about the original idea was to have 121 standby BPs. That kind of got changed late in the game. And we're talking about how we want to keep, at least some of us want to keep on these BPs that right now are hovering below the 30 line. Just for several reasons. I mean, we could have a chain that's totally agnostic to that kind of stuff and BPs just produce blocks. But it seems as a community, we're really valuing BPs that are making things for the community, interacting with the community. And we really like to, hang out with our BPs. And we want to encourage that. We want to keep these smart people on the project. So there's a Telegram channel /EOS proxies. We're trying to get people in there to educate them about proxying away their vote to people that are just more knowledgeable. I mean, hey, if you have the time and the inclination to research the BPs you want to vote for and vote for them, that's great. You should do that. I want to proxy away my vote. There's a new election every, about 2 minutes, a little over 2 minutes. I don't care to keep up with who's doing what and where this happened. But if I could find a proxy I trust a proxy to, I'd love that. And so right now we want people to consider proxying away their vote if they're not sure who to vote for, or becoming proxies, putting themselves out there to the community. And once we get those two basic things going, we can discuss, you know, what it is to be a proxy and what a proxy should be. For example, I want to proxy my vote away to Fuzzy, but how can I do it, Fuzzy? I mean, I know there's wallets out there that let us do it. I'm not saying technically, it's just, you know, we need people to declare themselves so that we know, you know, who's willing to take on this responsibility. And
well, thank you for trusting me. I will say that I am very much for us introducing proxies on it, because I think it's at least been something that BitShares has used, and it's helped a lot. I think that we should also explore in the future potentially even having dApps that reward people voting in different things. I think you guys are going to see different layers to it, but I'm very much in the early days. I think proxying is going to be helpful, especially if you guys are, you know, if we're all transparent. And I would urge people who are sitting there, if you're sitting there all day long, join that group. And thank you for Katie for doing all the things you're doing. I know that you're organizing a bunch of stuff, just like Crypto Grok. I see him organizing a bunch of stuff. Everybody's busting their butts, and it's so nice to see that we have help because it's been 5 years and we've been waiting for more and more people. So thank you.
Yeah, my last little plea here. So the more you proxy away your vote, we don't have to have one giant proxy. We can all decide to come under one proxy banner, several proxy banners. Don't proxy your vote, but vote. But if we want to pay these people to stick around that are 30 to 60 or whatever, it's Block One's not going to do it. The code's not going to change anytime soon. We'd have to go through referendum. The best way is just to vote for people you trust, that you know are producing blocks, that you know are good, that are listed right now 30 and under, and spread their wealth around. Because at the end of the day, I'm sorry, I mean, I don't know, maybe Bitfinex will live and die for the network, but I know EOS Sweden will. I know Eric's not going down without a fight. I know he's in it for the long haul for the community. He's not going to pump and dump us or do anything like that. So if you want those kind of people to stick around, you know, we need to come up with great community ways to vote for them. And I call on whales to put their money where their mouth is. If you believe in EOS, you know, proxy that whale vote away. Why not?
Absolutely.
Proxy it to Fuzzy or EOS Go or Asher, or I don't care. It'd be cool to see.
Are we going to go with proxy or delegate? Because that was like
or Grok. Grok, another one. He'll tell people what he thinks.
I don't want to. I'm a block producer. I can't I don't want to. I mean, is that like a conflict? Like to be a.
Oh yeah, that is. Sorry, never mind.
I can't do that.
Yeah, I almost forgot.
And then I just vote for myself, right? Like everyone else did.
Well, you could do that. That's
falling out of the ranking right now. Like vote, and we're running our own campaigns, but just, you know, that's ridiculous. Like the dudes that stood up the chain and did all the heavy lifting are like about to be pushed out. That's garbage.
I'm like watching it now. They're like Rio and Sweden are just like flipping back and forth right now between 21 and 22.
I'm interested, before we we kind of end this call here in the next couple of minutes, like how in the hell did you go from like 7 million votes to 25 million votes, Roman? Like that, like specifically, you went on Happy Show, and then what was put out that all of a sudden you had 25, like.
We stayed between like 19 and 24. We stayed with that number of votes when we were 29th. We stayed with that number of votes when we were 27th, and we only got a little bit more now that we're 20th. So it seemed like people in front of us were losing votes.
Interesting.
I wonder if maybe some exchanges decided that they shouldn't be voting with their users' tokens after all, or something like that. But the number of votes did not change in our climb, at least not over the last like 10 or so positions.
The last I remember, you were at 7 or 8 million, and we were at Tulip, so I was probably not paying attention. Then I looked back up and you're at like 18, 19 million pretty quickly. And I remember the Happy interview came out and I was like, what happened? Like, how did he go? And there was a day or two that went by. So I mean, you could have been accumulating that whole time up to that. I was like, did you do a certain show or did you promote something? Cause tell me where that was.
Yeah, I don't know. That's the short answer. But during those early days, during Tulip, everyone was climbing. They were just climbing at different rates. So it kept changing. That was just what it looked like when we were, tokens were coming online. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Can I make a public service announcement to block producers? Post your disclosure, your ownership disclosure. Not too many have done that, and it's a requirement. And, until you do that, then you can go back and start thinking about how you should be higher in the ranking. But first, post your ownership disclosure.
It's easier to count who did it than who didn't.
Pretty much nobody did. I mean, it's like 5 or 6 of us, I think. I mean, from your report. And I didn't put the links on my site. We had done it, but Katie basically came out with that report today. What was the URL to that, Katie, again?
Let me pull it up. Sorry. eoswire.org/BP compliance.
That's right, BP compliance.
And just to say there, we explain how we're rating, right? Because the little bit of subjectivity, we put a little bit of subjectivity there points wise versus ease of use of finding the links for this info.
Mm-hmm.
So now EOS Tribe's 100%.
Oh, thank you.
To
nice.
us, and gets an A. But the other categories are not subjective. It was like, do you have the BP JSON file? Do you have a code of contact? Do you have disclosures? And I'm telling you, we went really easy on people. We were
and
like,
it still wasn't very good.
I mean, there's some code of conducts, that they weren't necessarily labeled a code of conduct. It's just like their values, like who's to say, but you have to think the reason it's in the agreement, the BP agreement to have these things on your website is so that it's easy for people to find and read. So I would just think about people like me. Okay. I'm not going to know until someone educated me, right, to go /bp.json file to see that. Like,
right. So the easier it is to find, the better in general. But if it's hard for you, like where's an arbitration person or someone who's looking for this information? They go to try to find a BP and they literally cannot find them. Like they don't know who they are. There was no statement. There's no website. Like that's a scary situation that there would be an operator voted in that is doing havoc on the network, and they go to arbitrate or shut them down and they don't even know who they are.
Right.
Well, what's just real quick, one thing, and I'd like you have a lot of tech experience yourself, Steve. So I would like to ask you, because I was talking to Katie actually about this. One of the metrics that I think would be extremely valuable for people to be looking at when, I think it's the absolute most valuable. No, I know it is, which is how many blocks are you producing and how many are you missing? And what I hear is that there are people who are literally missing a bunch of blocks.
A lot.
They're making a crap ton of EOS, even though because they're still voted in as block producers. And I don't know how easy it is at this stage to access that information, but I assume that it's probably
Roman can answer that. That's his realm. Like I'm lipstick, man. I can do some front end, but these guys are like hardcore software engineers.
Sure.
I'm not. My co-founder is. I want to say that's coming, and the count is going to look very strange because of the pause. Because there was one block producer that was producing throughout the pause.
Oh yeah, we know who
that's
that
going to
was.
require some PR. So that's coming. I think that's going to be the story of the week for next week.
Cool.
I want to say something, but I will be nice. We'll wait for that one.
Well, we need this stuff, and I think these are the tools that we're waiting for, and that's why you were seeing it. Like it's that whole saying. It's like making sausage is not pretty. You know what I mean? But at the same time, we're in the early days too, so it's like we don't even know the recipe. We're still putting that recipe together, and we don't even have all the tools. We have general recipe. We're still grinding things by hand. We don't have the power blender. We don't have all that, whatever you use. But,
Well, I mean, that's kind of the most interesting thing about all this is that we're being judged so heavily externally, but yet there's never been anything like this before. So, like Rob was saying, like, how can you really judge and pull out all these talking points when technically there's never been a governance layer like this in arbitration? And I mean, I've said that several times. It's like not about us in the West. It's about the guy in Uganda who has no freaking property rights or no title. He can put his title on chain and then arbitrate and subvert his government who's basically trying to steal his land. So he has some recourse. It's like it may bump us up just a little bit here in the West, but it's going to dramatically like change the pockets of the world that want to hurt us. And no one's really like thinking about that it will make, like, Rob says this a lot, make the world more equitable, for the little guy, and I mean, it's more than just the guys in Detroit. It's in here in America. It's like people in the developing world that need this technology and need some, we're expediting the American system, the US kind of system, the good parts of that, hopefully, and giving people access to that in a software. And that's like, if you think about it abstractly, that's pretty cool, Well, cool, guys. This was a great talk. I'm going to go ahead and end the feed. If you guys have any last words you want to tell anybody out there, otherwise we will let you go. So.
Thank you. Nice meeting everyone.
Bye.
Yeah, nice meeting.
Wave.
Do your due diligence and vote.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
I'll just say, remember that the community and the code are resilient. It doesn't matter the rest.
Absolutely. Amen, Fuzzy. All right, I'll let you guys go. That is a wrap for the state. Take it easy, guys.